And we welcome you back to the Steve Malzberg Show, and I am so thrilled to tell you that for the next half hour, we're going to be speaking to the one and only Alan Dershowitz, who has been such a frequent guest on this show. But we're going to talk almost exclusively about his life, his time in the in Harvard Law School, his unbelievably top-level famous cases, and it's all in the book, Taking the Stand, My Life in the Law, by Alan Dershowitz. And Alan, welcome, sir.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
General Eric Holder was interviewed and indicated that he'd be willing to, I don't put words in it, work with Snowden if he were to come back to this country, but that any kind of clemency is out of the question, which I agree with. But what do you think should happen to Snowden, and how much of a invite should the Attorney General be giving him in effect?
Well, I think it'd be important to get him back into the country and to get his data back into the country and out of the hands of the Russians, or at least out of the range of where Russia can obtain more of this material. On the other hand, Snowden, to my mind, is neither a traitor nor a hero. He committed a crime, no question about that. It is a crime to steal classified material. He's not like the New York Times that published it, or WikiLeaks that published it, or The Guardian that published it. He's more like Daniel Ellsberg and like Manning, who were the primary actors who stole the material.
All along, his job was to scrape information, and he took it right to the Russians. He didn't have to do that, and now the Russians basically know it all, even what we don't know they know, and this was his plan all along.
I haven't seen any evidence of that, but regardless of what his plan was, he went further than he had to if he were just a whistleblower and a civil disobedient. For example, he revealed the specifics of which foreign leaders we may be overhearing, Ayad Olmert in Israel and Merkel in Germany. We're entitled to do that as a matter of law. There's nothing unconstitutional or illegal about us bugging foreigners, and he didn't have to expose that. He said he had an oath to the Constitution. That's just total nonsense. Your oath to the Constitution does not require you to commit crimes and go further than what the Constitution protects. And, if he was going to be a civil disobedient, he should take the consequences. That's what civil disobedience do and whistleblowers do. They take the consequences. They don't run and seek asylum from a country that's not really a close friend of the United States. Nor do they give the material over to somebody like Glenn Greenwald, who hates America, of this country, and who never, by the way, Greenwald never would have published this material had it been critical of Cuba, or critical of China, or critical of his favorite terrorist regimes, or critical of Hamas, or Hezbollah, or the Palestinian Authority. He was anxious to publish it because it was critical of the United States and hurt the United States.
Let me ask you one more, Alan, before we get to your life story here. And there's a group called Friends of Abe, and it's about 1,500, they say, conservative people in Hollywood, and from famous actors down to a lower level of fame and glory. And they've been trying to get to nonprofit tax exempt status for now. I think it's 3 years on the computer, so they could see their membership list, every meeting they've ever had, you name it, and that this is just another example of targeting a conservative group.
Well, I hope it's not true. I hope that they would have the same level of scrutiny if there were a group on the other side. I mean, certainly the previous alleged scandal ended up that they were just as tough on radical left groups as radical right groups, and the fear is that radical groups do transcend often their tax-exempt status and become very political. Look, I was a victim of Nixon's witch hunt. I was audited 4 times during the Nixon years, and every time the government ended up owing me money. So I didn't get hurt by it, except I had to pay for accounts. But I understand what it means to be the victims of the IRS, and we have to make sure the IRS remains scrupulously clean, never gets involved in politics, and never does the bidding of any administration when it comes to going after political enemies.
All right, let's talk about the book. And I don't even know where to start. Where do you start with someone of your stature who served for so many years in the same position at Harvard University Law School as a professor, and has had so many famous students who praise you from both sides of the political spectrum, and has been involved in so many high-profile cases. But for me, I think of you, and right away the O.J. case comes to my mind for whatever reason. Do you still get questions from people that you run into, that even maybe that you know about that ask you, did he do it? Do you think he really did it? And if so, what do you say to them?
I get it every day. And in my book, I describe a funny situation where Benjamin Netanyahu gets elected the Prime Minister of Israel for the first time. And I've known Bibi since he's 23 years old. And so he invited me into the Oval Office in Jerusalem and put his arm around me and said, Alan, I need to ask you something very confidential. I thought it was about, Iran's nuclear program or something. And he said, did O.J. do it? And I said, Mr. Prime Minister, does Israel have nuclear weapons? And he said, I can't tell you that. And I said, aha, I can't tell you that. So, what I've said publicly, I said it in my book, Reasonable Doubts, about the case, is that it's very possible that both juries were correct, that the jury in the criminal case was correct to conclude that there was a reasonable doubt, that the tampering with evidence by the prosecution raised that reasonable doubt, but that the civil jury, presented with a somewhat different case with a lower standard of proof, may have come to the right verdict as well.
Let me ask you one question about the son. Did he ever testify?
No, and there were always kind of rumors around, but sons and fathers don't have the same DNA. So that's always struck me as a very speculative story. The fascinating thing is why people are still so interested. I don't regard this as one of the more important cases.
Remembered for, which one would you consider to be the most important?
Well, I've had 37 homicide-related cases, murder, conspiracy to murder, capital cases, and I've won almost all of them. And I've done it through science, by using science to undercut the prosecution's case under what was essentially a death sentence. We had to use law, diplomacy, economics, politics. It really took every talent that a lawyer has, and we eventually got him out in time for him to father 2 wonderful children. He's now a grandfather, and he's one of my few clients who remained a close friend.
And that was, there was a lot of importance to that, obviously, because, as you said, getting him out was very complicated. But when you talk about, let's talk about the Klaus von Bülow case a little bit. I want to play for the folks a trailer. It was from a film back in 1990 called Reversal of Fortune, and I believe that Ron Silver, the actor, played you in this case. Let's say it's hit cut number 29.
Of one thing in your favor. Everybody hates you.
Well, that's a start.
Must have something to hide.
In Europe, a gentleman is given the opportunity to end things properly.
You're a very strange man.
You have no idea.
All right, talk about that case, because that's another case that I'm sure you get a lot of questions about.
Well, that was really the first case in which I used science to prove somebody innocent who everybody thought was guilty when I first took the case. We were able to prove that the coma was not caused by insulin, but was caused by her own ingestion of barbiturates, and we were able to do it by simply using better science than the other side had. And I think it really made a very important point that when you win appeals, you don't only win technicalities, but you can actually use it to prove a man who everybody thought was guilty to be innocent. And he's now still living in England and writes me cards every week practically thanking me for saving his life.
And you believe, or are you not at liberty to say, as in the O.J. case, that, you believe that he did not do it?
Well, there was no crime, and that's the end result. There was no crime. It was self-administered, self-destructive behavior, and he was falsely accused of something that turned out not to be a crime at all. So I'm very proud of that result.
All right, we have another segment to go. We're talking to Alan Dershowitz, his book, Taking the Stand, My Life in the Law. We will continue right here on the Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax TV and radio.